Good morning, everyone. So, in today's session, we are planning to focus on the career options post CA. So, in this series of open house session, you must have seen a lot of session. Let it be audit, forensics, management consulting, and many of the sessions are lined up in future. So, we thought of why not to demystify lots of open opportunities for CA. So, it may be in which all sectors which are there. So today's open house or today's webinar is mainly focused on that aspect. So first of all, really appreciate you coming on Sunday morning, that too on a weekend and Sunday morning. So hope to get the most out of this session. And I'm sure that at the end of this today's session, you will be very focused and very clear on what all aspects you need to consider before pursuing a career option. And you will be able to decide which all option to choose from. So the goal of this today's broad session is about to give a broader perspective of the career alternatives which are available for a CA and how to plan your career ahead. So in career planning, it's not a one-time game, it's a long-term process. So it starts from your entry till the reach you to the desired goal. So today's session would be a very broad-based session wherein which we will just line out what all opportunities you have available. And so in today's session, we will mainly touch base upon the broader career opportunities which you have, like lots of domain which you can select. So how you can plan a particular area expertise which you want to take up, how to structure your thought process so that you will reach to your end goal which you want to. Today, we will not touch base upon in depth very specific on a particular profile because we have a lot of session plans relating to around 19 to 20 odd profiles available for a CA. So in that particular session, it will be mainly how a day in a life of that professional looks like, and it will be directly done by that same professional. Today's session is mainly inclined to give you a broader aspect and broader overview of how you can plan your own career. So I have inculcated a small 5-step blueprint for career planning. In this 5-step, I've tried to cover right from selection of the profile till to get the company shortlisting. So in order to start up with that, what you should do is first thing is to understand which all profiles are available for you. So it can be a lot of different avenues. So you should think beyond audit and taxation in the banking sector, in the various other institutions which are there. So we will touch base upon that. So in this session, we are dividing into two parts. One being understanding the career planning aspect, and second thing, we'll walk you through most of the profiles which are available out there. In 5-step blueprint for career planning, the first thing being to understand the alternatives. So you always think beyond audit and taxation. So it can be other management consulting or other fields which are there. We will touch base upon that in the probably second part of this session. Then finding out the best fit profile. So once you have all the alternatives are available to you, so you can just like this session is mainly planned for that, understanding all the available alternatives which are there. List what inclines to you. Like let's say for me, if I say I am more inclined towards the finance domain, whereas I'm not inclined so much in the audit or taxation kind of domain. So in that way, you need to plan accordingly which all profile or which all alternatives you want to pursue. So after having availability of around 20 odd plus profiles, you need to shortlist the best profile which is available for you. It can be 5 or 6. You just need to think on which basis your interest, basis your liking, and basis your past experience. You should not niche the selection of profile to a very smaller extent. I'll explain what is a profile niching and how much you should do in the later slide. Then comes up evaluating the pros and cons for the shortlisted profile. Let's say after 20 odd profile, you shortlisted 5 of them. And I recommend you should shortlist more than 2 at least, because it is always good to have a backup plan. Once you shortlist those profile, you should evaluate the pros and cons. Now, pros and cons can be mainly the exit opportunities which are available, the experiences of your past experiences, as well as the experience which is shared by your colleagues or experiences shared during the open house session. the entry reality. So in terms of the entry reality means what all skill sets which are required for you to enter that particular profile. In terms of experiences, the experience can be of your own personal experience. Let's say you are in an audit or you are into a taxation field. So in that case, you have an expertise across that subject. So you are good to decide what all subjects or what all career opportunity you need to pursue later on. So that being one of the critical aspect. And the lastly comes up the compensation. So if you ask anyone in at the start of the at the initial stage of the career, the compensation part which is there should be considered at a later stage, rather than you should consider the skill sets and the expertise. Now again, coming up to this point, this is very subjective, but considering what most of them have suggested or most of them have given advice upon, the compensation part is always considered towards the next step. First thing being the career options and alternative. Yeah. So the next being ranking your preferences. So once you have shortlisted the profiles which are available out there, rank your preferences. Now, how you will rank the preferences? Be on the basis of your interest, your basis of your liking and your experience. Now, why this ranking your preferences? Ranking your preferences will help for your interview preparation and shortlisting of your company. So if you rank your preferences, what will happen is that if you have like 2 to 3 offers of companies available, or you have 2 to 3 interviews lined up, so you would be able to decide upon which one should I focus more and which one should I target more upon. In that way, you will be able to be a structured thought process and you can focus more on that particular interview. So let's say you have three companies interview lined up for the next week and you have to make a massive preparation. So in terms of preparation strategy, you can do is that you can first focus more upon the best profile available out there, the best company which you want to go into, then going on to the next one, and then probably the plan C. So what we'll have is you have a multiple variants of plan available basis your ranking of the preferences. Once you rank the preferences, so out of having, let's say, 20 options available, you shortlisted 3 to 4 of the career options and opportunities available. What you should do is you should then you should move on to company shortlisting. So out of these 5 profiles available out, let's take an example of forensics. So in terms of forensics, the companies which you can prefer for joining in would be all the big fours, in fact big six for that concern, and certain specific forensic firms. So the option niche down to around 20 to 25 odd companies which are there. So that way you can think and very targetedly apply to these companies. So that will help you to kind of plan your further career progression and focus more on the interviews. Now let me deep dive through profile niching and shortlisting of the option. So giving this broader moon chart which is available, in this, an investment professional is mainly a person who is working in an investment banking or private equity or venture capital. So this being an investment professional, so roughly if you see the staff strength would be around 10,000. The investment banking out of the investment professional would be around 4,000 odd staff strength. And in investment banking, if a specific sector, it might be around 500 of people, let's say infrastructure financing. So in terms of niching down your choices, the choices shouldn't be as broad as a in finance domain. It should be in a shorter way, like investment banking. If you niche down to a very specific choice, let's say infrastructure finance, the opportunities might be very less, as well as entry would be a difficult barrier, because you could see there is hardly 500 of them in that specific sector domain. So you should not be a very sector specific. Instead, you should be sector agnostic at this particular stage. Now, the main question which arises is how much to niche down. So I answered that part. Like you should niche down till when you are becoming a generalist kind of thing, rather than becoming a very specific at the start of stage. So if you can see this broad overview, generalist, specialist, and generalist. So at the start of your career, you are usually a generalist. So you are open for various sectors. You explore various sectors. Let's say it may be infrastructure, it may be energy, it may be consumers, it may be tech. So you experience a lot of sectors which are there. Then you become a specialist. So you become a specialist usually after 5-6 years in a particular post qualification experience. And then again, you become generalist. The reason you become generalist again is that you take up a senior leadership position. Let's say in a CFO kind of role, a CFO is responsible for across the segment overview of finance function. So it may be very specialized finance function, or it may be like a compliance, or it may be like a law audit kind of scenario which is there. So it's a generalist position. So if you start with a generalist and then you move on to the specialist and then again back to generalist, this will give a clear sense of what exactly profiles and what exactly a CFO or a particular senior leader has to know. Wherein which if you start with a specialist, what will happen is you will be never able to experience the generalist part, which is therefore required for a senior leader. Is a very interesting map. So I got it from the Corporate Finance Institute website, which is there. This career map focuses on most of the career options available for CA. So if you observe closely, public accounting, banks, institutes, and corporates are the major four quarters of this specific career map. Most of them must have done articleship during in this public accounting field, so which includes the assurance kind of segment. It also has the avenues such as due diligence, the transaction advisory, the valuation. I'll just touch base upon this in a later part. A specific section is dedicated for this. Then comes the banking side of it. The banking side is broadly the commercial banking, the investment banking, the equity research, and the sales and trading side. The institution is mainly the PEVC's research and the portfolio management. And in corporates, you have the treasury, FP&A, investor relationship, and corporate development. This broad career map is mainly focused on the finance aspects or of aspects which are more towards CAs which are there. So this is a broad career map. So we'll focus more upon this career map and respective fields in across the next slide. So now I'm giving you a broader aspects of various profiles which are available out there, and this will be followed by a Q&A session. So I'll just cover upon and touch base upon various profiles which are available, and some of them profiles you might be aware of initially, and some might be a little new for you. So starting up with the assurance audits and related profiles. In assurance audits and related profiles, you can see one being the statutory audit. It's a great start sector, like mainly an audit sector would be when in which you must have started with your articleship, audit and taxation. So it's a great start. If you're not even in audit right now, you might plan to get into audit and then probably look for some exit opportunities post 1 or 2 years. So you will find good exit opportunities post that, because audit gives you a very generic experience. So they don't confine you to a particular sector initial stage, and they will give you a broader aspect across, and it's mainly covered during the articleship. Coming up next is the accounting advisory section. So it's like some big fours have a subset of it, some having a specialized department. So accounting advisory is mainly the IFRS and the Ind AS kind of advisory which they provide. So it might be due to the fact of the accounting treatment which is there in as per the Ind AS and IFRS. The financial statement preparation for IPOs also is included in that profile. Now, if you go beyond statutory audit, there are internal audits, and internal audit, there are two type of functions. So in internal audit, one can be as a consulting function, wherein which most of the big fours or most of the big firms try to target upon. That is the internal audit. So it's more of a consulting function, which has like risk management. You design systems and processes. So that's mainly covered up in the internal audit part. Coming up next is the internal audit part as an industry function. So in industry function, it's maybe in the banking, or it may be like an industry internal audit. So in an industry internal audit, you would be visiting a particular factory or a particular location to conduct an internal audit. Whereas for a banking, it's more of a risk management function. So in risk management, if I be very precise, it might be L1, L2, or L3 line of defense, which is there. So like management controls, risk mitigation, and internal audits which are there. So that is an internal audit function in a banking industry. So in internal audit only, you can find 3 to 4 broader domain aspects wherein which you can go if you are inclined towards the audit side of it. Due diligence is a part of an M&A advisory. So mainly it comes under the advisory section, but it's very related to the audit. Mainly it covers up the buy side as well as the sell side due diligence. So let's say acquirer and a target. So due diligence is conducted for both of them, and it's a part of a deal cycle. So if you see the exit opportunities, IB, VCP can be one of them, or in a credit function of a large corporates or a bank. Coming up next to is a forensic audit. In forensic audit, it's mainly upon the fraud investigation, collecting of evidences. So those who are regular followers of ViginCA's open houses, they must have attended the forensic session which was there yesterday. So wherein which the deep dive across what all forensics, how in investigation and all the details were covered upon. So this is just gives a broader overview of what all options available. I'm not deep diving it into each specific section, but covering from a broader range aspect. In terms of exit opportunities, as I've mentioned, audits, internal audit or maybe statutory audit, you might enter into the accounting or advisory function or accounting in a large corporates, or you can also be in a specialized finance function post some years of experience in that particular internal audit segment. Let's say one of the big FMCG conglomerates hires for an internal audit profile. They keep you for like 2 to 3 years in that profile. They rotate you across locations, and then later on they will kind of hire you in the accounts or finance function, which is there. So that's how a career transition happens in this sector. Due diligence, as I mentioned, it's about IB and PE exits, and forensic audits is a separate line itself. You can be you can also get an exit towards a risk-based function in a bank, or let's say in a large corporates, which is there. So forensic audit also has a lot of exit options in that way. Coming up to the next one. So now this is a general broad overview of how a function works like. So let's say there is a CFO and they have a lot of functions which are there. So a CA can venture into most of them. I'll just briefly touch base upon what all these alternative and option for. Just imagine a very large corporate in front of you, let maybe an Aditya Birla Group or ABC Group or Tata Group, a big business houses, conglomerates, or an FMCG which is there. Imagine that in front of you, and then think of the various functions which they have. So broadly, if you categorize what all roles and opportunity a CFO looks after, so they are mainly into like financial reporting and compliance roles, which is like mainly the FR and consolidation part. So in audits, you must have interacted with these teams. Then there are also various relating to the statutory compliances, which are relating to like the secretarial functions or something like that. Then comes a little specialized finance profile. So in investor relationship profile, mainly it is covered upon managing the relationship with the investors which are there, and private equity fund have invested in your company. So you need to keep a relationship between them. You need to ensure that their reporting, their requirements are fulfilled. So that's mainly covers up the investor relationship part. Then coming up with the taxation. So it's broadly taxation being the direct tax and the indirect tax function across. So it has like litigation. So mainly in a large corporate, they have a separate department. In a smaller corporate, it's integrated in the finance function itself. 1 to 2, 3 people dedicatedly managing the tax function. So this broadly covers the reporting and the compliance function. A good option would be the CA can venture into all of these. In statutory compliance, CAs who are done with let's say a law kind of degree or a company secretary as well in addition can be into statutory compliance. Investor relationship mainly prefer a MBA based profile because it's more of making presentation in equity analyst meetings, or it may be like investor relationship with banks or with the investors. So it prefers MBA kind of profile, but a person having an experience in a finance based profile, let's say in an IB or let's say in a VCP, can get into the investor relationship profile as well. So that's one of the good profile to have it. Then comes up with the specialized finance function. In specialized finance function, in some of the corporates, they have a separate department altogether to handle these. It is like a treasury banking. M&A fundraising, mainly you can find this in a startup or a large corporate wherein which they have lot of acquisitions and mergers which are going on. Supply chain financing in major FMCG based business, supply chain and working capital finance is a separate wing altogether, and they largely integrate itself with lots of banking, lots of lenders and other aspects which are involved. Structured project finance being mainly into uh, financing of a large long-term project. So it may be infrastructure roads project or infrastructure energy projects or a power plant or something like that. Sustainability CSR is broadly covered as a part of environmental, social, and governance ESG framework. Then coming up with the pricing and costing. So pricing and costings are mainly roles which are taken up by the this cost accountants, as well as certain CAs also venture into these specialty function like a pricing and costing of a products which are there. And then comes a technology profile, which is mainly SAP and Oracle based implementation. Coming up with the next function being a FP&A and a finance business partner. So it mainly covers upon budgeting, forecasting, creating MISs, dashboards, and a strategy wing. So the broadly a finance business partner as well as an FP&A person prepares and revolves around these aspects. So preparing forecasts, then getting data across from the different specialty functions or a financial reporting and compliance, and then kind of presenting it to a CFO or a CEO or using it for an investor relationship. So that's broadly the part of the MIS and the FP&A part. And a strategy department, some have a different strategy department. It is a link between the finance function as well as the commercial aspects which is there. So in a strategy department, they will broadly think upon how we can grow. So it can be in terms of the commercial aspect. So it may be like how you can grow the number of users or number of footfalls, or it can be on a finance aspect, like how you can optimize your cost, how you can increase the revenue, and how you can plan pricing for it. So that's how a broader based profile looks like. A management trainee is given a rotational roles across this profile. So let's say you have a 2-year management trainee. Every quarter you will be in a different department. So someday you might be in FR consolidation, or the other might be in MIS dashboards, or someday you might be in M&A fundraising. So that's how a broader structure happens. Coming up to the next is the demystifying the consulting word. So now we are moving more towards the consulting. So in consulting, what happens is I am covering most of the profiles which are there in the consulting. So I have taken the reference from one of the big fours page which is there, and they have just listed down what all consulting has and what all consulting consists of. In consulting, it's broadly about these 8-10 options which I have mentioned. I'll touch base upon that in a specific slide. Now, please note, these are the profiles available. These are not specific for CAs. So you have a competition from MBAs, you have competition from other professionals as well. But just giving a broader aspect of what a consulting world is looks like, because consulting is such a broader word, and it has so many aspects into it, so many departments into it. So it's very important to understand and niche down on which segment or which type you want to venture into. So one being the deal and strategy. So it mainly covers of how to find out target, how to do some commercial due diligence, digital due diligence, operational due diligence, strategy, and then coming up with the strategy like TEV, techno-economic viability, then growth strategy, entry market strategy. So these mainly strategy aspects and deal aspects. So these are mainly deal and strategy kind of thing. So again, I'm focusing on one aspect, that is this deal and strategy which is there are available to most of the are available to MBAs as well as other finance professionals. CAs also can get an entry towards certain profile, let's say the due diligence profile which is there, or M&A strategy as well. So the MBBs, the McKinsey, BCGs, and Bain, they provide mainly towards the strategic consulting which is there. Coming up next is the corporate finance and IB. So typically in a consulting, any big four consulting, they have a separate department for corporate finance and IB. So that mainly covers upon the deal origination, M&A, fundraising, IPOs, buyouts, all strategies. Coming up next being the transaction services, that is the due diligence, the one FDD, financial due diligence, which is mentioned, and the SPA, the sale and purchase agreement advisory. So this being a little bit legal kind of advisory. again, for a CA, all these profiles are open. So right from corporate finance IB to due diligence and SP advisory as well. It also includes the bid advisory section as well. Coming up with the next one is the recovery and restructuring. So business recovery and restructuring is mainly like planning how a company can be recovered. So it's like turnaround strategy planning or negotiating with the shareholders or diagnosing what's going wrong in that particular business. Valuation being business and financial modeling. Now, the difference between a business and a financial modeling is that business models are mainly towards setting up a business. It gives an overall holistic aspect. Whereas in a financial model, it's mainly upon a particular project or a financial aspects of it. So the Big Four covers both of these. Then comes the valuation for financial reporting, the index requirement, the taxation valuation, the investments portfolio, and the purchase price allocation. Now comes one of the most another critical department, which is an integration department, wherein which the Big Four hires for majority, that being the pre-merger and the post-merger integration. So how a company has to integrate itself after an M&A happens is the post-merger integration, and pre-merger is a mainly strategic planning on how an integration can happen. Next being a strategic consulting. So that's where most of the Big Fours and MBBs hire for. So it may be business strategy consulting, consumer strategy, product pricing, technology. All the strategy consulting and advices which are required are under this broad domain. Coming up with a specialty finance kind of function, being a CFO function outsourcing. So the roles and responsibility of a CFO are kind of outsourced. So that is like an outsourcing agency. So let's say a small conglomerate wants to kind of implement a shared service center. So for that implementation, they hire a Big Four for implementing those. So that's like finance effectiveness or CFO function outsourcing kind of profile which are available. And some of them also outsource FP&A function. So it includes creating management dashboards and all. Also in tech consulting, usually they prefer engineers, but there are many CAs who are into this tech consulting as well. So it includes like data analysis and implementation of Oracle and SAP. So this is the broadly how the consulting world looks like. Coming up next is the banking industry. You have lot of aspects. Like in banks, you can CA can be found in almost any of the departments which is available out there. It starts with the corporate banking. Corporate banking being like handling relationship or being as a relationship manager for large corporates. So internally the banks bifurcate into various aspects, one being the mid corporates, or one being the large corporates, one being emerging corporates. So they bifurcate internally, but that's broadly under corporate banking. The accounting finance domain, that's more towards regulatory requirements and accounting of the details. IB again, IB is a part of a banking. In IB, they mainly do an underwriting services as well as M&A advisory across the bank. Credit appraisal department, there are two main important aspects. One being the banks also have an internal credit rating for every specific client or account which they have. So it's just similar to what the ICRA or a credit rating agency does, but it's mainly catering towards the internal credit rating. So let's say you have a rating scale of 1 to 20. So 1 being the best, like AAA category, 20 being the worst, that's the in below investment grade. So that's way it's look at internal credit rating. And second being the deal appraisal, that is a credit appraisal. So in credit appraisal, it's mainly like the deals which you enter into, or the transaction or underwriting which you do, that has been, or any loans which you sanction, that goes to the credit department and they kind of review the propositions which are there, and basis which they sanction the loan. So that's what a credit appraisal department does. Equity research being making research reports relating to various profiles, various company profiles, various financial details, various company updates which are there, and recommending a buy, sell, or hold decisions. FP&A in a banking is also there, so it's little different from what it is there in the industry, mainly catering towards the banking side. Then comes the back office operations and the internal audit and compliance. Like I mentioned earlier, it's more of L1, L2, L3 line of defense. Now, Coming up to the one critical aspect, which is the Indian bank as well as the foreign banking operation. So usually a foreign banking operation, let's take it an example, JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley, they hire CAs mainly for a mid office or a back office role, considering, let's say, investment banking. In that role, you kindly you assist the offshore teams, let's say in Asia, Middle East Asia, or Europe middle markets, or let's say US market, and you kind of assist with them relating to pitch presentation, or let's say making financial models. Whereas in Indian bank, they mainly cater towards the Indian clients or the Indian deals which are there. So that's a broad difference between what an Indian banking offers and what a foreign bank offers. Again, coming for an opportunity, in most of the foreign banks, you get an offshore kind of opportunity, and almost 90%. So some do get a front office, or some do get an Indian clients related opportunities. Whereas Indian bank mainly cater towards the Indian clients opportunities which are there. Next being the other opportunities which are there, let's say in taxation, you have direct, indirect, transfer, and M&A taxation. So for this direct taxation, we had a separate session in open house wherein which we deep dive into majorly all these components, and most of them who have done with articleship and taxation must be aware of these internal bifurcation. M&A taxation is a part of a deal advisory kind of section, wherein which the taxation advisory for any M&A transaction has been considered. There is also a rating agency like ICRA, CRISIL, BWS. So these are all rating agency. They issue credit rating for clients. They do have an internal advisory option, which is wherein which they mainly plan for the public policies or any business plans which are there. And they do, some of them like Crystal and all, they do have an investment banking arm as well. So that mainly covers up that. Coming up with the career planning. So one being, like, let's say you want to go into FP&A, financial planning and analysis. How should you enter that? Let's say you're not getting an opportunity directly into an FP&A. What you should do next? In that way, you should plan a career progression. Let's say you are right now in assurance and audit. Try some industry function, let's say financial reporting, or let's say any industry finance function, and then you can get an exit to an FP&A. So that's a career progression. Or let's say you are into a management consulting, or let's say a function like a CFO function outsourcing. In that way, you can kind of enter into this management consulting role, and then you can go into the FP&A. So it's not necessary that you will directly get an entry towards FP&A. You need to follow an intermediate path which is there. So that's like a step by step you should take up to reach your desired goal. So it's known as a career planning. Let's take another example. Let's say you want to go into private equity. The two main options to enter private equity, which is very famous, is being investment banking or management consulting. You can go to IB and then move on to VCP after some years of experience. Or what happens is getting into IB is difficult sometimes. So in that way, you can plan for doing a due diligence or a valuation based profile, and then going into IB, and then going into private equity. So this is a kind of a illustrative career paths which you can plan. So I have